Are we okay? We are live. Hello out there in quarantine land and happy 420. It's great to be with you today. Many thanks to Nugtopia for creating this virtual festival for everyone at home, imbibing and consuming responsibly. I also want to say a very special thank you to Graham, Grassroots America Magazine, for having us do this part of the broadcast today. My name is Jordan Person. I am a columnist and a journalist for Graham, Grassroots America Magazine. And one of the columns I write is called The Medical Minute. I've been a nurse for almost 20 years, and I've been doing massage for about 15 years, and I've been studying herbalism for 6 years. One of the things I have the honor of writing about is the up and coming scientists and researchers that are truly making the cannabis industry what it will become. And today I have the absolute honor and fangirl moment of interviewing Dr. Jackie Salm. She's the woman in the box next to me. And today we're going to talk about terpenes. We're going to talk about isolation and more. If you have any questions, there is a chat box. Please feel free to send those questions in. We can't hear you and we can't see you, so that's the only way you can communicate with us. Dr. Salm, thank you so much for being with us today.
Absolutely. I'm honored. It's a great day to be part of something like this.
Right? 420, no better time. I mean, if anyone would have ever told you when you were in high school or at any other point in your life that on 420 in 2020 you would be interviewed for being the terpene queen, would you believe them?
No, but that's okay. It would be pretty amazing. It is amazing. I don't know. Yeah.
So tell us all a little bit about, let's start at the beginning. Where did you go to college and how did the terpene dream begin?
So I went to the University of South Florida. I'm actually local in Tampa, and that's where the university is. I grew up in Sarasota, actually, so just an hour south, so I didn't end up super far from home. I did both my undergrad degree in chemistry and my graduate degree in chemistry at USF. And what led me there, honestly, was I just didn't want to go too far from family. I had other opportunities. I actually, you're in Colorado. I considered going to Boulder. I had a scholarship to go there. I had a few other options, but I wanted to stay near home and I wanted to stay with my community. So I went to USF, and it was one of the best decisions I ever made. It led me a lot of really great places and helped me find the passion that I didn't even really know I had for chemistry and just a lot of the different sciences that I've fallen into now, really.
And so what was your major?
So undergrad was chemistry with a minor in Japanese, actually. And then for my PhD was organic chemistry specifically. So natural products chemistry, focusing on looking at all of the different compounds that are produced by fungi, bacteria, different other microorganisms, as well as macroorganisms like sponges, tunicates, mostly marine, like I said. And then doing both chemical ecology, which is the study of how they communicate with each other, really through chemistry and molecules. And then chemical ecology, a lot of people may not realize, leads into drug discovery really well, because you have all of these different compounds that interact with different biological systems in different ways, and they're really already designed to interact with receptors in our bodies. So then it also leads to sort of the chemical ecology of the human body, as I like to say, where you go into drug discovery. And that's, you can look at this chemistry, look at these compounds and see how they might help people with different ailments, from, cancer to viral infections to dementia, depression, all the different things.
That's incredible. And so one of the little blurbs that they had up about this interview today was that you spent some time in Antarctica. I know you had 2 years and we didn't have to adjust that, but tell us more about out. How did you end up in Antarctica? Was there a particular scientist that led you there? Tell us all about that.
Yeah, so I was actually an undergrad when I got to go. And
I think you're frozen.
Oh, did I freeze? Am I any better now?
There you are.
Am I back? Hello?
You're back.
So yeah, I actually went as an undergrad, and I was in my senior year, and my professor I was already doing research with for a couple years on we were actually with Medicines for Malaria Ventures from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So we were trying to find different new drugs for malaria from endophytes and different fungi. During that process, I got really interested in a lot of the Antarctic projects, but I wasn't actually on any of them yet. And I honestly almost fell into the trip a little bit. We had quite a few people who had already gone, and he was trying to find someone new to go, and he knew I was interested in grad school there. So I feel like it might have been his sneaky little way of getting me interested enough to stay for grad school. He may not want to admit that, but so I worked for his name, Bill Baker, and he's a well-known natural products professor. And he decided to give me the chance to go down there. And it was actually 9 years ago now, which is crazy. It was in 2011. And yeah, right about this time.
And where in Antarctica were you stationed?
I was at Palmer Station. So Palmer Station is, most people have heard of McMurdo Station, most likely, which is a larger, maybe 1,500 to 2,000 people at its peak. Palmer at its peak is about 35 people. So we're on an island known as Anvers Island, and the station is right on a point that is right on the water. And you're pretty much restricted to just 3 small buildings and a glacier behind you to go hiking on if you want to. Wow. Yeah, it's an interesting experience.
It sounds like it.
Yeah.
Isolation is a very interesting thing, and it's something that we all are experiencing sort of a version of right now. Do you find that there are any comparisons between some of the feelings that you might have felt those days when you felt very alone on that island versus how you're feeling maybe stuck in your house right now?
Yeah, I definitely think there's similarities. There's a lot of differences too. One of the biggest similarities I would say at first is that first week or two when, everyone probably went grocery shopping and started to run out of certain things. That's similar on station. So Palmer Station can only be reached by boat. So whenever we want fresh fruits and vegetables, we have to wait for the next ship to come in. And we call them freshies, and everybody loves them. I mean, that's what you want, right? You want those fresh fruits and vegetables, especially since it's a pretty desolate place, Antarctica, at least above water. It's rocks, it's ice. I mean, sure, you get penguins and seals and adorable things, but for the most part, you don't get a lot of foliage and just nature that you're used to seeing. So getting those fresh fruits and vegetables is always a good day. And you get those for, like I said, a couple of weeks until they spoil. And that's kind of your first stage. And I would say that was similar now, is kind of that moment of, oh man, I have to go to the grocery store again. And how's that going to work out? But that's the difference, though, is that at least we have grocery stores and we have options, right? The second, I would say, similarity is the first few weeks when I got there, I enjoyed because it was new and it was exciting, but I also didn't enjoy because I wasn't around family. I wasn't around friends. I didn't get to, that's when the isolation sort of kind of kicks in, the loneliness kind of factor. And after, I would say about a month though, suddenly it was great. It was like I had gotten over that hump. I started to enjoy it, and we'll see if that's a similar thing. But I think the big difference here is that now everyone's sort of isolated in their own homes, their own environment, their own things that they already know. This was a little bit more of an adventure, so I think that was a nice distraction. And I think the one thing that I'm interested to see is when I first went to Antarctica, I went with a lot of people who had been quite a few times, and people who have been in even more isolated places around the world. I was actually on station with Christina. She's Astro Christina on Instagram. She was one of the female astronauts that went on the first spacewalk last year on the space station, and she has been all over to isolated places. I had another woman I was on station with, Kate, who had been there tons of times and all over the world, my professor. And a lot of them first said to me, one of the things that's going to be really weird is actually when you try to go back home. And I want everyone to kind of keep that sort of thing in mind too, is that right now it might be awkward and you're in this sort of isolation state. But when I came home, it was like a flight response almost kicked in as soon as I got on the airplane and I landed in Tampa, because I was around more people on a plane than I had been around in 3 months. And suddenly I didn't know who to trust. I didn't know what all these people were. And I think that everyone's going to go through that a little bit, is kind of like getting back into society and how are you going to trust things again. And I think we have to really keep that sort of mental health factor in mind for a lot of people, because it hits and it can hit hard for some people. So. Yeah.
I think that is fantastic advice, and something that I haven't really heard anybody say throughout this process, and I think that's why I wanted to ask you specifically about your time in isolation, because none of us really have anything to compare this to right now. I've heard people say this must be what house arrest feels like, and things similar to that. The majority of our population has never experienced anything like any type of isolation. And so thank you for that insight. I feel that that's so incredibly valuable to give people that, a little bit of warning to take it slowly as we all venture back into coming together as a community.
Yeah.
So let's talk some more about terpenes, since today is 420, the sort of stoner type holiday, the cannabis holiday. So let's see, what should we do first? Let's talk about the diterpene that you discovered.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That was, I was already in the cannabis mode in my head. So it's like backtrack a little bit. So that was my last year of grad school. I actually worked with Chris Witowski. He's also with AltMed, and the two of us worked on a project for an Antarctic sponge and trying to find new different terpenes from that sponge. We were also doing some chemical ecology stuff. They actually just published another paper in the last week or two in the Journal of Natural Products with more terpenes, similar ones. The one we found was called Darwinolide, and it originally showed activity against MRSA biofilm. So we had a lot of interest just because it was a new, unique terpene to begin with. And then it also had really nice activity against infectious diseases like MRSA biofilm, and any sort of bacterial biofilm was really hard to break. A lot of our current antibiotics don't always do that effectively. So we published that in 2016 in Organic Letters. And then the following year, the American Chemical Society called me up on the phone, and I was at my mom's house. I remember being shocked and not really understanding what was going on. And I thought my professor was playing a trick on me. And he called and said, "Hey, have you seen how many views your publication has gotten online?" And I had no idea. And they told me it was up to, I think at the time, about 90,000 views, and which is just absurd for organic chemistry. And they ended up saying, "Yeah, you were the most read author by far for the American Chemical Society last year. So we want to do an event for you in San Francisco at our conference." And again, I thought it was a joke. It took me a while. I was laughing. I had no idea what to do. And once I realized they were being serious, then I got excited, of course. But so actually myself and even Chris, and then our friend Danielle actually went with us to just kind of support us and have fun. And we had an event there. And Bill Baker, the professor that took me to Antarctica, was actually in Antarctica at the time. So he was able to Skype in from Antarctica while we did the award ceremony. So it was pretty cool. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
I know that you are up for another award. I know that you were supposed to accept it this past month, right? But I'm assuming they probably delayed the ceremony due to the pandemic.
Yes. Yeah. That was
So,
also
about that award.
Yeah, it's also the American Chemical Society, but now there's actually a cannabis subdivision. So they created an award called the El Soli Award, which is named after Dr. El Soli from Ole Miss, who's done the majority of cannabis research legally, I'll say, over the last, few decades. And yeah, he's been, huh?
Legally in America.
Yeah, in America, exactly. And so, yeah, he did a lot of the research for the natural products originally that were coming from cannabis. And they created the award named after him. And you can kind of apply to it. And I did it sort of for fun because I went to the conference last year and I thought it was great. And I wanted to help promote the research. And yep, again, got a phone call. I was like, hey, you won. So, and this one was awesome. It was fun because I think even when you said the fangirl moment, I feel like all of us get it for so many people that just probably wouldn't even expect it. And I got it for this because, well, the person who's actually giving their talk right before me is Justin Fischetic, and he's a big name behind a lot of the terpene research and metabolomics of cannabis. So I didn't really think my name would be up there near his, at first.
For the people out there listening that don't understand the very basic knowledge of the word terpene, can you please tell the viewers what a terpene is and why you enjoy studying them so much?
Yeah, so terpenes are actually the largest group of natural products. So when I say natural products, those are compounds that are produced or chemicals by different organisms that aren't essential for them to survive. They're usually more to help be a defense against something else or for to ward off predators or even to attract mates sometimes or other things. And these natural products they're really unique. They build a lot of things that you might not think about. And in the cannabis industry, I'll say the word terpenes is used a lot for a lot of different compounds that actually have different names in chemistry. So a terpene is a pretty simple molecule. An example from cannabis, your alpha and beta pinene. So pinenes are from pine trees, originally, but they're big ones in cannabis. And those are basic terpenes that you can call a terpene. A lot of the other ones are actually terpenoids, we like to say. But I'll say generically, when I talk about cannabis and terpenes, I'm including all of those things. I know the chemists out there cringe a little bit when they're like, oh, that's not really a terpene. But for the cannabis industry, we kind of have a big umbrella of what terpene means. But other examples are just things that are very aromatic, typically, when your smells and tastes and those sorts of olfactory responses. So anything that black pepper is beta caryophyllene, which is also a big one in cannabis. You find it in hops, you can find it in mangoes, you can find it in a lot of different things. So they tend to be smells and perfumes and essential oils, basically.
And out of the terpenes that are in cannabis, I know that there are several that have the ability to, I don't know if sedate is the right word, but to calm you down, like linalool, for example. Are there any that can increase anxiety? Are there any that people, I know in a lot of the legal states, or at least in some of the legal states, the medical programs are now testing for the top 5 terpenes. Mm-hmm. Are there terpenes that people that suffer from anxiety, for example, can look for to avoid?
So I wish there was a simple answer to that. Unfortunately, it often comes down to the effect of all of the terpenes and all of the different things in the plant. It's rare that you can find a study that associates only one terpene or one compound to those effects, like anxiety. I can say that there are some that are called mood elevating. So you're more limonene is an example. Anything that might be similar to like a menthol or camphor or something that's from the peppermint. Some of those are still in cannabis too. I would say any of those more uplifting terpenes, if there were any, might be the ones that if you're already sort of jittery and anxiety and you're already pumped up, you probably don't want something that's really high and something that's going to uplift even more. So I would say that's probably the closest association that you might be able to make to those things. I'm just not sure that any direct evidence is shown that one specific terpene will increase your anxiety. Yeah.
That's so fascinating. Terpenes in general are just so fascinating. It's such a large part of the entourage effect of what we are all experiencing. And something that you and I touched on a little bit in a previous interview was FICO, RSO, how in the ethanol extraction of cannabis, you have all of these terpenes and all of these flavonoids and all these other molecules that we still don't know much about in comparison to other derivatives of the plant.
Yeah. You hit the nail on the head with flavonoids and a lot of those other compound phytosteroids. There's a lot of different chemistry going on. And even just within that terpene umbrella that I mentioned, the ones that most people emphasize are all what we call monoterpenes. They're smaller terpenes. When I say smaller, I mean on atomic level, like there's just less atoms on them. But you also have sesquiterpenes and diterpenes, and all these words are these are larger and larger terpenes that have a lot more, they're even more elusive than a lot of the other chemistry. There's quite a few studies that will say unknown sesquiterpene one after the other in their studies, and they don't even know what it is. And that doesn't even include if you have, so what we call the mirror image of a compound is for stereochemistry. So it's kind of like your hands. Your hands, when they look at each other, they look the same, but when I try to do this, my thumbs are in the wrong spot, right? So the three-dimensional shape of terpenes matters too. And a lot of third-party testing, aren't getting down to the details of exactly which terpene they're even analyzing. So and all of that is just sort of unknown. And it's wild. It's crazy.
It's the wild, wild west still. The infancy of an industry is what we're dealing with here. Yeah. And it's because of research scientists like yourself that we are able to learn this incredible information about this plant and about other plant medicine, in general. So thank you for the work that you've been doing. Yeah. You also had mentioned a terpene found in frankincense that you kept seeing. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so one of the major terpenes from frankincense, certain species of it, is called alpha-theugene. And some people out there may have heard of thujone, which is the compound from wormwood for absinthe, that sort of thing. This is different. This is not that. So alpha-theugene is just a non-oxidated version of thujone. So this compound has been used to help differentiate different species of frankincense in the past. And it's one of the more volatile, which just means it flies away fast. So it's one of the more volatile terpenes that's in cannabis. We started to see it pop up in a couple new genetics that were growing. This was at AltMed, Florida. And we didn't really know what it was at first because we hadn't really seen it much. And as we started to notice it popping up with only certain phenotypes, we decided to look into it a little bit more. And that was when I realized that nobody tests for this terpene. So I was like, well, that's interesting because it seems to be really abundant in some of our phenotypes, but for most of them, it's almost non-existent. And when I looked into different publications, it's usually pretty low abundance or almost non-existent for most stuff that's been tested, if it has been tested at all. And so I don't know if it's an environmental factor, but I think that's the thing people have to keep in mind is growing cannabis in Florida and growing cannabis in Colorado is not the same thing. They're different environments. We have terrifyingly gross humidity here, which can affect a lot of things when it's wet. Temperature, humidity, light, like all of these factors, or even nutrients, they're basic factors that will change they'll change the chemistry of every flower that you produce. So it's important to keep that in mind.
That's incredibly important to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
A lecture you could give to all the genetic breeders and growers that exist in the cannabis industry. I would like to raise my hand and ask for that lecture, please. That's yes, very, very important.
Yeah.
The growing environment is drastically different from state to state. And I could go on all day about that, but I'll stay focused for the purpose. Let's see. Would you say that alpha fugine is your favorite terpene? Do you have a favorite terpene?
So from cannabis, yes. I would say alpha fugine for sure is my favorite terpene. I'd say out of, maybe all the terpenes in the world, I'm a little bit biased only because one of the first terpenes that I had discovered during grad school was from a deep sea coral off of the islands off the coast of South America, technically, but they're just north of the peninsula in Antarctica. And my friend Jason had actually gone on a cruise on a ship that I was supposed to be on, and he caught this coral and he said, "Jackie, this one looks awesome. You should look into it." And I looked and found 2 new terpenes that hadn't been found before. And it was right near these rocks that were called shag rocks. And it's sometimes in the natural products world, we like to take the location and the species or different parts of where we found the organism and make up a name. Well, it happened to be from shag rocks and it was a terpene. So me being the ridiculous person I am, I'm like, well, we need to call it shagging. Why wouldn't you call it shagging?
I love it.
So I was like, well, this is going to be great. So so I actually published it as shagging A and shagging B.
Oh my God.
And those are definitely my favorite.
That's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
I do see that we've had a couple of questions pop up, and I'm not sure if we were allotted 30 minutes total. So I want to go ahead and make sure that I ask you these. Okay. The first question I see is, what was the coldest temperature you experienced while you were in Antarctica?
So I don't think it got much colder than -8 degrees. And I guess I should specify, I believe that was -8 Celsius, not Fahrenheit, if I remember correct. I was there through the fall. I didn't have to do a winter over, so it gets a lot colder during the winter. But it was funny because at the time there was a big snowstorm in Boston, and my friend that was at Harvard, I had sent him an email as a joke and said, "Haha, it's colder in Boston than where I am right now." Because I think it was -20 with the wind chill there. So yeah, it didn't get terribly cold since we're also on the peninsula, which is not as cold as if you're going into the Antarctic Circle and even down to the South Pole. So nothing too crazy. For a Florida girl, it was terrible, but
yeah, exactly. I'm a Florida girl myself, so anything, and I'm like, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
And then our other question that I see is, she struggles with severe digestion issues regarding acid reflux and indigestion. Are there any terpenes that you could specifically identify that could aid that issue?
So I don't know of any terpenes for that. As a completely non-MD or doctor opinion, obviously, I would say that just from my own experience with those things or other people around me, It usually came a lot down to the diet. How much acid are you intaking just daily in different forms for your diet? And then obviously probiotics and that sort of thing. I don't know of any terpenes though for that. Sorry.
Yeah. No, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
So again, I'm not sure what they were allotting us for time. If we were right at 30 minutes, that would be right now.
You can go over. I just got a message from Kyle. I'm so creepy, aren't I?
You guys just kind of sneaks in there.
Yeah, you guys could go over. So you can keep asking questions, or if there's anything else that you want to ask Jackie Jordan, feel free.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Okay, awesome. I think that was everyone's question over there, so I won't worry about that. So let's talk just a little bit more then about perhaps your plans for 420. Are you consuming or imbibing any strains today? Are you a CBD fan? What do you like to consume?
Yeah, I'm totally biased because obviously I worked at AltMed, and I still to this day believe we have the best CBD strain out there. It's called ACDC. And again, depending on your environment, depending on your place, that flower can change, I'm sure. But for the one that we have, it's really nice. And it's funny because before the interview, was looking for something around my room, and I actually found one of these little Graham magazine one hitters that they had been passing around. And I was like, oh, hey. So yeah, I'll probably just make use of that and go for some of my high CBD strains.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Is there anything, well, actually, what are you doing now? What is your contribution now to the cannabis industry?
So I still consult more on like a scientific level with AltMed and Move. I have actually decided, and it's probably terrible timing because of the current pandemic going on, but so Chris and I decided to start some of our own sort of ventures, and we're both natural products chemists, and so really anywhere that there's nature's chemistry, we're pretty interested. But we decided to venture into some of this more psychedelics realm and some of that new sort of evolving industry that will hopefully happen in the next few years. But I'd say that we've been in the cannabis industry for a while. He's actually been in it about twice as long as I have. And one of the things we really want to emphasize about cannabis, but even the psychedelics, is that there's a lot we don't know. And I think obviously we talked about that. And I think with especially some of your stronger medicines and other things coming from nature, there's also the chance of things being toxic. There's chance of things being, cannabis luckily doesn't really have that many negative side effects, fortunately for people. But some of these other things, if they just got kind of released on the market, could be a pretty intense situation. So we really want to try and get ahead of the research on some of that. And we felt like with our backgrounds and passion and everything that we already have for just different neurocognitive types of conditions, we figured we would take the leap and jump into our own company. So we started a company called Silera that we're hoping to get some good research done in the next few months once we're allowed back in the lab.
Well, that's awesome. Congratulations, first and foremost. That's absolutely amazing. We could talk about that whole spectrum for hours and hours. But I won't go too far down the rabbit hole with that either on 420. That's a whole other interview we could do, though.
Yeah.
Something pop up. It says, if the ratio composition of terpenes and other molecules are to the final health effects of medical marijuana, do you see the future of the industry going towards more personalized formulations? Oh, and this is definitely something you've discussed with me before. Yeah. So if we could talk about the themovars.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is that right? Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
If you could define that word for our audience, please.
Yeah.
And then explain.
Yeah. So for the chemists, we like to say chemovar. That's really just a phenotype, but we're focusing on what chemistry that phenotype of the plant is creating. that's one of my biggest things is personalized medicine across the board for just medicine and healthcare in general is necessary at this point. I think the cannabis industry has really helped shed a lot of light on that, just how personalized it has to be. I mean, every patient is different. Everybody has different conditions. Everybody has different mental states, different bodies. And I think that it has to go in that direction. We have done research at AltMed for showing different flower that produces different chemistry, what types of effects we're seeing from different people. Unfortunately, things like pain are a little bit subjective, so we can't always do a ton with that. But we have noticed that, one patient will say that only RSO works for them, and anything that's purified THC or CBD doesn't do anything. And then we have some that purified THC is the only thing they can do to still function during the day and feel right. And that's so if you're doing more distillate based, but I really hope that the industry goes in that direction. I think it's going to require a lot more standardization. I don't think a lot of companies want to admit just how hard it is to standardize the medicine and keep it consistent all the time, because you're trying to manipulate nature, and it's a tough thing to do consistently and regularly. So I really, really hope the industry starts to focus more on those different cannabinoid ratios, terpene ratios, and really starting to personalize medicine for patients. So I hope so.
I hope so too. When I teach cannabis massage, I teach the variances that are possible in the endocannabinoid system. And so to Kirsty's question, yeah, absolutely. Because of these variances, if the industry doesn't start paying attention to everything that Dr. Salm just explained, then we aren't going to have the individualized medicine that people need.
Yeah.
We know that Tylenol has been studied in a lab to the utmost extent. Acetaminophen has been turned upside down and inside out, and we've done controlled placebo study groups, and we know exactly what it's going to do. When it comes to strains of cannabis, you can have 15 different chemovars of Blue Dream. And so, and that's in one grow.
Yeah.
So, if we aren't studying and personalizing the medicine like that, we're going to continue to have not only the variances in the ECS itself, but in the ability to give people medicine. So great question, Kirsty. And I hope that is the direction we're taking as an industry as a whole.
Well, and even mentioning when you said acetaminophen, I just saw a post by Yogi Bear on Instagram. He was talking about new studies that have happened in acetaminophen and showing some of the negative effects they're suddenly starting to associate with that. And think about how long that stuff has already been around. That's one pure compound. It's been around for decades and decades, and we're still learning new things about that.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
When I teach, I tell my students all the time, I show them what PubMed is. I show them, I go online, I say, this is PubMed. You can type in any word you want to learn more about in the top of the search bar. First, I'm going to show you acetaminophen, the most commonly prescribed over-the-counter prescription drug, over-the-counter drug that there is. There's 22,000 studies that have been done on acetaminophen. Now I'm going to type in the word cannabinoid. There are 26,000 studies that have been done on cannabinoids. So there's more scientific research available on the word cannabinoid than there is on the most commonly prescribed drug. So it's hard for me as a medical professional to hear anyone say that there's not enough information out there when there is. We have another question. Is there a way to test for an endocannabinoid deficiency by looking for metabolites?
I'm not sure. I know that, obviously we do have our own endocannabinoid system, and we do have anandamide and some of our own endocannabinoids that I'm just not sure what the metabolite would be that you would look for when that is sort of, excreted from the body, or if it's found in blood, or how you would actually test for that. I'm sure they have tests to be able to see how much of that you have. I think the bigger problem is that that's only one of a lot of different metabolites that could act on your endocannabinoid system. So we may have tests to test for a few of the ones that we know what they do. But I mean, receptors and proteins in your body are a whole different ballgame. And
there's so many levels of variance.
What they do, yeah.
Right. You could have less CB1 receptors and more CB2 receptors. You could have less of both receptors. You could have none of other receptors. There's so many, and then you could be sensitive to specific flavonoids, or you could have too much anandamide, or there's so many types of variances, just like when you think about any other biological system, your nervous system, your endocrine system, your reproductive system, all of those systems, when they have physiological variances, that's when you have disease. And to answer your question, the site is PubMed, PUBMED.org. It's put through NCBI, the National Center for Behavioral Intelligence. It houses all of the journals and scientific publications of the last 20 years for really anything that's been studied in science. So it's an incredible resource of information. When I get bored at night, I often go on to PubMed and read science. So I recommend if you like to read and you like to learn, definitely check out that site.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any questions out there in quarantine land? Let me see what else. What else do I want to know? I mean, there's that I want to know. So do funguses have terpenes the way that cannabis does?
Oh,
do they have more terpenes?
I mean, they have plenty of terpenes. So the very first one that I ever found in undergrad, actually, from a fungus was a pretty toxic sesquiterpene. So it's still a terpene, but it was one that has been studied for cancer studies, but it ended up not working out for malaria because it was a little bit too toxic. So it just depends. But I mean, there's a lot of studies out there on the terpenome, so the whole kind of world of terpenes and where they can come from. I mean, bacteria, fungi, all of it. Again, the terpene class is the largest class of natural products in the world. So pretty much if it's an organism, it probably produces some kind of terpene somewhere. And that's just because of how the biosynthesis works. I mean, most things have the enzymes to produce those compounds. So they definitely have terpenes. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I
have two questions. One is, will you continue your Terpene Queen social media?
Yes. So I have on Instagram, it's Terp Queen PhD, and that one I'm going to continue. I don't have one really active on Facebook as much. I really only have my personal account on Facebook, but at least for Instagram, I do have Terp Queen PhD that I'm gonna maintain that. That's not going anywhere. I mean, I do a lot of things on there too. Again, since terpenes are everywhere, I post about, thyme, the herb that does thymol and all these other terpenes. And you've got, tons of herbs and plants and fungi and lots of things produce terpenes. So and other interesting natural products. Those are just the ones that I happen to like a lot. But yeah, I'll definitely keep that going. I don't know, I just enjoy science communication too. I think especially now, there's just so much random stuff being thrown out there all the time. So try to keep it honest.
Thank you for doing that. It's so necessary during this time where people are always searching for information. Someone just said, I wish I was a sponge. That's why I'm laughing. Best terps for anxiety.
Anxiety. Oh man, it depends. So again, it really depends on the person. For me, a lot of strains cause me anxiety because of THC actually more than because of the terpenes. And it depends on how pure or different the THC levels are. But you've got linalool, as you mentioned, which is similar to what comes from lavender. It's also in basil, usually, actually. And then you have, I have to bring out some of my terpene information. I think they have, it depends again on the person, but humulene, which is from hops too, especially for kind of that slightly more sedative, calming kind of effect. That's why hops for a long time was also good for sleep and that insomnia. So humulene is a big terpene in most cannabis strains, just like linalool.
Myrcene for me personally.
Myrcene for you, yeah, yeah, and that's where it can be really different for different people, because I know that a lot of times they'll try to associate myrcene with indica strains, but then you have Blue Dream, which has a ton of myrcene, and that's definitely sativa. So, and Blue Dream doesn't give me any anxiety at all, which makes no sense because I feel like a lot of other types do, but that's a high THC, but it is high in myrcene. It's high in a few other things. So maybe that helps my anxiety too.
It could be. It could
Yeah.
be the opposite effect.
Yeah.
Let's see. Any advice for early career natural product chemists interested in getting into the cannabis industry?
Yeah, I get asked that question quite a bit, even on Instagram. And so I kind of, I fortunately sort of fell into it because I had a good friend and colleague that was already in the industry looking for someone that he needed to do research on specific things. And he happened to kind of fall into his position from someone else finding out about it and knowing he had an interest. I definitely think your best bet is to reach out. There's a lot of good people. I mean, the cannabis industry is a lot more on Instagram than anywhere else, but there's a lot of good scientists on there and researchers all the time that reaching out to them, messaging, DM somebody, ask them what they think, ask them what they feel. Get as much information as you can first, just because I could tell you that, just build your resume, go get a degree, and you'll find your best place. But there's a lot of good companies, and there's a lot of sketchy companies, and there's a lot of companies that can make themselves look like good companies, and some that you might think are bad, but they actually are great. So, getting to know the people in the industry and trying to talk to as many other chemists and scientists, extractors, any of those people, just getting a feel for the different places, because that's going to be step one. And then once you think you have an area or a place that you might be interested in, find out how much they actually invest in research. A lot of the companies, understandably, are more focused on just getting products out and trying to sell products and getting them to the people. But there are quite a few out there that have actual R&D programs and research. So definitely pay attention to those ones.
A great question. I'm not surprised that you get asked that often.
Yeah.
I still see, the surge of people that still moves to Colorado with, big dreams and big hopes. And I'm sure that still continues to happen in every state that has recreational cannabis.
Yeah.
Because we still have those states that don't even have medical programs yet.
Yeah. Yeah. And looking for the new, even the hemp industry now, though. There's a lot, especially since that's starting to be more regulated, there's probably going to be a lot of research happening. I have a couple friends that are at different companies that are already trying to do a lot of their own research there's a lot of options. I would just say definitely helps if you have some kind of, at least associates in like a biotech or some kind of science, or bachelor's in some kind of scientific field that has taught you how to use, balances. And a lot of the equipment is chemistry equipment in the industry, between the extraction equipment, the lab equipment, all of it. So it helps to already have some kind of knowledge of those things. And people do, now that the industry has become a lot more legitimized over the years, they are looking for that now.
Isn't it so interesting? That's such an excellent point, that so much of the material used now has all been completely repurposed, for cannabis.
Yeah.
Like essential oils, for example. We've been distilling that oil from plants for a really long time.
Yeah.
But put the cannabis plant in there instead, and everybody loses their mind. And it's
Yeah.
and it's not a new tech; it's something that's been done for a really long time.
Oh,
But
yeah.
it's amazing that so many pieces of equipment have now developed an entire new life thanks to this industry.
Yeah. No, it is. And it's definitely boosted just, I would say, chemists and natural products chemistry in general. That industry was a lot bigger when we were first sort of the antibiotics boom, and a lot of the pharma companies really cared about natural products. And then around the 90s, they started to realize it was expensive and that they didn't really, it took too long. So a lot of them started dropping their programs and not really hiring as many natural products people. So the cannabis industry has been a huge boost for a lot of the natural products chemists in the chemistry world.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing. You never think what will end up being cross-utilized later on, but what an amazing journey this has been for all of us.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, Tom, if you could pop on and let us know if we're supposed to keep going.
Yeah, no, I mean, if that's it, we could wrap it up now. We could, again, Nugtopia, thanks to Nugtopia for putting this together. And, thanks to Graham Magazine and you, Jackie. Now I actually learned a lot on here.
Nice.
Really great for me. Because I know a little bit about terpenes, but I mean, you bring a whole nother level to it, Jackie. And I love that you're here in Tampa. You have to come by and visit when you get a chance. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the magazine before we end. Why don't you, Jordan, tell us about Graham Magazine and what you guys are all about, and let the viewers at Nugtopia know a little bit more about you as well.
Absolutely. So great research about medicine, Grassroots America Magazine. It's a publication that actually started in Florida and is now nationwide and even in some other countries. It's a print and online publication. We are temporarily holding our printed publication since not social distancing savvy, but you can find all past issues on our website at getgrahamnow.com. And yes, I am a columnist. I write the Medical Minute. So it's a column where people can write in and ask questions to me, our staff nurse, and I will give you concise answers to big questions. And the other column that I'm doing now that I mentioned at the beginning is I am interviewing amazing scientists like Dr. Salm, and just kind of educating people who these doctors are that are changing and shaping the world of plant medicine for all of us. I think it's fantastic that we can talk about all of the entertainment professionals that have come on and into the industry for all of the various reasons. But I think it's even more important that we talk about these incredible scientists and physicians that are truly in the lab changing the game for all of us. They deserve the spotlight.
Excellent. Well, it's really important because it helps us all stay connected and informed. Everybody, seems to forget that, we're a whole ecosystem here, whether it's,
Absolutely.
Yeah. And this is a great way to connect. My first time meeting both of you. It was a pleasure. Thank you guys so much. And thank you guys at Nugtopia.
Yeah.
Happy 420, everybody.
Happy 420, guys. Bye now.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.